Welcome, everybody, to our podcast. My name is Sally Rooney, and I'll be hosting this podcast with some amazing women in the audio world. Let me introduce you to them. First, let me introduce you to Becky Scarrott, who is an audio editor at TechRadar. Becky became an audio editor in 2024, but joined TechRadar as a senior staff writer focusing on HiFi and audio. Before joining the team, she spent 3 years in HiFi testing, reviewing and generally enjoying everything on the audio scene. Our second guest is Linette Smith, co-founder and news editor of HiFi Pig. She's been with HiFi Pig since 2013 as the co-founder and audio tech reviewer. Linette has recently been part of Women in HiFi meetup at Bristol HiFi show just last month. Our third guest with us today is Rhiannon Gray. Rhiannon Gray is an acclaimed British music producer, engineer and songwriter. Recognised by Music Tech magazine as one of the UK's rising stars of production. She's been recognised in 2019 MPG Award nominations for the Breakthrough Producer of the Year and Breakthrough Engineer of the Year. Our final guest I would like to introduce you to is Emily Jones, representative from the Yorkshire Sound Women Network, YSWN for short. Emily is a consultant, artist and coach with 15 years of music experience. Currently, the industry lead for Yorkshire Sound Women Network, she has held senior roles at the Glass House, the Barbican and the Cheltenham Jazz Festival. She also produces electronic music and DJs as Echo Juliet. I am so excited to have you all here with us today to discuss audio and how passionate we are as women about it, and also to show women exist and thrive in the world of audio. So first, we're going to do a little warm-up round robins where I'd like your input on some relaxed audio. Can I ask you to take it in turns to choose 3 words about what audio means to you? So for me, I would say it's escape, energy and connection. So Becky, can I go to you first?
Yeah, I would say dancing, expression. I'd probably go escapism again.
It's a good escape, isn't it, music? Emily?
It's very hard not to repeat things that have been said already. I mean, I talk a lot about escape in the music that I make, so that's definitely a big one for me. Uplifting, like audio uplifts, I guess. The spirit and the mood. It's very hard not to just think like audio is everything. Like, what is a silent world? Is so yeah, everything, uplifting, and escapism.
I'd say passion there as well.
Yeah, maybe.
Rhiannon?
Yeah, I was gonna say connection as well. So I'll I think second, I think Becky, you said connection too. So I'll third that. I also like energy. I think that's really great. So I'll add joy and fun to the mix.
They were good, yeah. And Linette?
Well, I was definitely going to go with fun and joy, which I'm just repeating, but those are really important things, I think, from audio music, and definitely connection. As someone that sort of grew into music in the early 90s rave culture, the connection was definitely a huge thing and still is today. So
going round everyone, what is the artist or specific track that inspired you into the world of audio? This is a big one because I know there's so many.
That is a very hard question. I think actually, and this is maybe a bit of a left field answer, but the thing that kind of really inspired me to follow a career in music and audio was playing. I used to play percussion in orchestras and in youth orchestras, and the piece that has stayed with me ever since, that I still go back and listen to now from that time, is Bernstein's West Side Story. That was there's just, as a percussionist, it's like Christmas. There's just everything in it. But it is just an incredible piece of music or set of music from the film. So that probably is the one that inspired me the most.
Really makes you feel, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Rhiannon?
Gosh, it's hard to pinpoint just one artist or group or piece of music. But I grew up listening to artists like Alanis Morissette, and bands like Queen, Dave Lee Roth. My parents were really big into rock. What inspired me to go into songwriting was Katie Tunstall's first album, Eye to a Telescope. I remember falling in love with the writing on that album. But in terms of going into production and engineering, I used to go to a lot of gigs when I was really young, and I was always fascinated with the sound desk. And I couldn't tell you why, but maybe it was just all the flashing lights and all of the kind of the faders, but I was so drawn to it. And now that's what I do. So
I likewise had a bit of a rock chick childhood, early teens. Really loved the rock music, but then I think what really got me was electronic music. So sort of when I was like 19 or so, once you got all the things with the 303s in, like Josh Wink's Higher State of Consciousness and tunes like that. And then sort of coming forward to things like The Prodigy and then things like Daft Punk, who absolute geniuses. I would probably say the sound of the 303 really did it for me. So yeah, that electronic sound.
Yeah. Okay, and Becky?
Well, I was actually, it's one of the things I choose to leave off my CV or keep on it depending on what we're doing, because sometimes it means you're taken slightly less seriously. I come from a background of professional dancing. I was a professional dancer for 23 years. And so I was literally the ballet girl with the ballet bun, and wanted to be the Sugar Plum Fairy, and I got to do it. So the dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies, and then like as you're saying, the musical theatre influence was so strong. The opening arpeggio cats is just like wonderful. Um, Phantom, I did Phantom, and then da 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 da. Like that is just phenomenal when you hear it around the theatre. Um, and I think people sometimes think that dancing is all about the dancing and the applause and the performing. And for me, it wasn't. For me, it was honestly just a love of music. And when you can perform so on the music, that is it's a really rewarding, like elevating. Yeah, I'm going to say, yeah, Sugar Plum Fairy.
Yeah, I love it. It is. I mean, the theatre and orchestra, and they are all consuming as music, aren't they? You feel it in your bones. I think, you could listen to an album on repeat, but you couldn't listen to the actual production because I don't think your heart could take it. It really takes you on a journey, doesn't it? Obviously, all of you live and breathe audio every day and very often throughout the night and the weekends. At downtime, how does that affect you? Do you still like to put on an album, or do you like complete silence?
yeah, it depends what my workflow is like. When I've got a heavy workflow, I definitely need silence. I sometimes will find it hard to switch off listening to music, especially if I've spent, all day, every day for days at a time being really tuned in to music. And especially when you're doing any type of editing or mixing, your ears are so finely tuned. So in that way, then listening to music away from work, can mean my ears are still so tuned in. So I'm not really listening so much for pleasure, but I'm just picking up on all of the nuances of what's going on. So for me, silence, reading, sometimes I'll switch over to listening to things like podcasts, and listening to people talk rather than listening to music. So for me, it's really important that I give myself plenty of respites in between projects so that I can still enjoy listening.
Yeah, important. Linette?
Would say, I mean, when you're listening critically, very much similar to, I guess, to Rhiannon, when you're actually making and producing music, when you're actually doing reviews, or I don't really have chance to do that many reviews now, but my husband will be reviewing, and you're listening on a very high-end system and you are listening critically. The break from that, silence again and reading, doing the crossword, but also when we go out in the car it doesn't have a great hi-fi in it or anything. We spend all our money on hi-fi and travelling, so we drive a Dacia, so there you go. But we tend to listen to BBC Radio 6 in the car and discovering new music. So it's not music that, quite often it's not music that you've heard before, so it's new. So you're not listening critically to listen to what a piece of equipment is doing. So I find that much more refreshing than necessarily listening to music that I know, because if you know it and you've listened to it on like high-end systems and you're listening for what that system can do, you find yourself drawn into going, oh, can you hear the champagne pop on that track, or can you hear the snare in that track? So something new that you didn't necessarily hear before is more refreshing to me.
Yeah. But do you do that on purpose? Do you listen to new artists and new bands to help you enjoy the music? Or is that because you like to hear the new artists coming out? Is that a mixture choice?
A mixture of both, really. I think Radio 6 is really good for discovering new music, because a lot of it is very, very new and from artists that you might not have heard before, and a lot of it is very different to what you would hear played at hi-fi shows, as you would know, I imagine. So yeah, it's kind of a mixture of the two there.
Big John is always a one I hear at audio shows.
Keith Don't Go and Hotel California, which are great tracks,
I love
wonderful tracks, but you know, you sometimes have to go, no, I can't listen to that again.
What about you, Becky?
Yeah, like so much Mark Knopfler, just so much at the hi-fi shows. I agree, but I listen to music, but I'll listen to Snoop Dogg, or I'll listen to something completely unrelated to, if I'm still, because I do still perform, and the thing that you're performing to, you get so sick of it. You love it, but you get so overly sick of it. And similarly with hi-fi reviewing, we have, I'm sure we're all the same, we have our reference tracks that we test to. It's important. I do think it's important to switch those up, because as you were saying, Linette, I think you become used to the certain inflections in the notes or certain things you're listening out for, and it needs to not be work when I'm listening to something for enjoyment. And so, yeah, I will listen to music, but I will always switch it up.
Yeah, similar to what others have said, really. Silence is very useful, partially for like a mental break, but also as a DJ I spend a lot of time in very high volume environments, so silence is like really, really important. My favorite thing to do the day after I've been DJing, aside from sleeping in, is to go for a swim, and like the walk to and from the swimming pool, and I don't listen to any music, and normally I would, I'll just have a quiet day basically with like just background noise, and I find that really helpful. But similarly to what Rhiannon said, when I'm working on my own music, particularly if I'm mixing, I can't enjoy other music in the same way. It becomes much more like critical listening, which is not the reason why I listen to other people's music, is not to pick it apart. So different approaches at different times depending on what's happening, I guess.
It's interesting actually that a couple of you mentioned about the background noises that you might miss ordinarily, and in scientific studies it's actually come out that women have a better 2 decibels higher than men. We can hear more detail in the audio. Do you think that as women not being as present in the audio world, that's something that they're missing out on, not utilizing our skills as much as they could?
A really interesting fact. I'd never heard that before, but it is a really good point that there's probably a level of detail being lost. I've also heard in the past that men don't see as well as women, like color representation is also not as good. So generally we are just superior in a sensorial fashion, I guess.
We know it.
Yeah. So it's a really good point that possibly there is something being missed out on. I guess it's also about the level of ear training and how experienced someone's ear is. So the inexperienced ear of the ear of an inexperienced woman is not going to be superior to what am I trying to say? The other way around. Yeah. The ear of an inexperienced man is not going to be as good as the ear of an inexperienced woman. So yeah, I guess there's possibly something that's being missed there. It's an interesting question.
What's your take on that, Linette, being the co-founder of a popular HiFi magazine?
Yeah, I think it's something that has been bandied about for, well, at least as long as I've been in the industry, that women do hear better and hear higher frequencies. But again, like Emily said, if you don't listen critically, then you don't train your brain to listen for certain things. So like you said, inexperienced woman may not hear as well as an experienced man, even though her range of hearing perhaps is better. But I can hear, and I have heard when we've been at shows as well, where something's been wrong, and it's like there's something wrong with the tweeter on that speaker. You can hear it vibrating, and people look at you like, Matt, and it's like, no, there's something wrong with it. And you know, if you could hear it, there is something there. So I think possibly we are being listened to more, and that sort of skill is being picked up on.
To the engineer, Rhiannon, how does being a woman and perhaps having that sharper creative perspective impact your technical approach to a mix on a production project?
Wow. In terms of kind of a creative perspective when approaching a mix or having being more creative, it's a really fascinating kind of it's the first I've heard of it too, by the way, that women apparently can hear slightly better. But yeah, I guess I get all the technical things out of the way first before kind of making any creative decisions. I like to kind of get my house in order, so to speak.
Do you collab with anybody else where you've possibly heard something that they haven't?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always had a really sharp ear for audio ever since I can remember. But, you know, what Emily was saying earlier about, you know, it is really about training your ears. So it depends on the type of training that you've had. And I, studied music from a young age, and I was taught to how to use my ears, and that my ears were, going to be my greatest tool. I think I'm also a little bit unique in that I have something called synesthesia. So I also don't just hear music, but I see music as well. So I see it and I feel it. And during my career, I've come across other women and non-binary engineers that can also do that too. So I wonder if it's maybe possibly like a sensitivity thing as well. I don't know whether women are just they could be more attuned in that sense. Yeah, that's definitely my experience anyway.
Thank you. So to Emily, the advocate, when you were growing up, what was the representation of women in audio like? How might seeing more women behind the console have changed your journey?
Well, my memory was of not seeing any women, to be perfectly honest. The visibility was just not there, really. Certainly when I was a teenager. I actually was I did some lecturing for BIM a couple of years ago on their undergraduate music production degree, and there was some really interesting slides they gave me which showed Google Images for what is a music producer, and they had some screenshots of those search results from 2019 and some screenshots from 2023, and that's relatively recent, right? But even between those time periods, all the Google image results from 2019 were all of men sat at big desks in the studio. And then by 2022, 2023, you were seeing there were more women in there. Not everyone was white. You were seeing more home studios. So it's quite interesting that even though there has been change prior to that, the general perception of the internet has taken quite a while to catch up. So I think it's good that those students now are seeing that kind of representation, even just from a basic Google search, let alone from going out into the industry. But I personally sort of learnt to produce relatively late, and I think if there had been more visible role models, I'm sure I would have done it earlier. I had an interest earlier, I just didn't know where to start or how to find my way in. but it actually, the thing that gave me that initial like starting point was a course from an organization called Music Production for Women, which effectively gave me that role model early on that just wasn't there in my teenage or student years, basically. So I think it would have made probably about 10 years difference if I'd had that earlier.
Knowing that was an open door for you.
Yeah.
I absolutely think it's worth saying that to any HiFi brand who might be watching this. There are women with lots of expendable income who want to buy into HiFi. And I think you're right. Not only is the female HiFi audience perceptive in terms of what they can hear, they're also plentiful and more plentiful than we might be thinking. So a big part of my job reviewing HiFi products involves attending launch events. And at one of these events recently, I met a bricks and mortar HiFi store owner. And he says to me that all of the people who come into his showroom are men, 100% men. Women never, ever go in. And then he says that 80% of my customers are female. And I was like, they're shopping online. They won't go into HiFi stores because this is seen as a very male dominated environment where she doesn't want to get perhaps spoken down to, overlooked, belittled. So they're shopping online. There's definitely a customer there. The stats that because I looked into this and I was like, hang on. So 56% of Apple Music users are female and 44% are male. That's according to Business of Apps, and 56% of Spotify users are also female. And that's really interesting when you consider that globally, the human population notes like a very slight male majority of 50.4% to 49.6% of women like recorded births. So in terms of women having the edge when it comes to hearing and that not being implemented, I think absolutely yes. And the story that I have that makes me think that is now being recognized is that I recently went to a really big headphone launch. And when I go into these sort of launches, you have the audio engineer standing there, and he tells you how he's tuned these headphones. And I always think that you missed off the end of the sentence. You tuned it to a man, because you know that your customer is largely, well, you think it's men. You are a man. You have tuned to a man's hearing. And as you say, like, women sort of hear higher, and we hear overall, we can hear more detail. We can hear quieter sounds. That's what the 2 dB thing is, I think. And but this particular event I went to, the woman, the audio engineer who had tuned the active noise cancellation in these headphones, she was a brilliant woman. And her name was Sakaya Fujimoto. And in sort of 7 years of attending launch events, that's the first time I've ever known the audio engineer to be female. And so I think it is changing, in consumer audio, this is, but a long way to go. But yeah, that was a positive thing recently.
I think another thing that I came across with headphones, which came out of the panel that I did at High-End Munich last year. We had a really good audience interaction, and one of the young women in the audience, she was saying that headphones, they're made for men as well. A lot of the high-end headphones are so big, they're so heavy, and you can't wear them. It's like, and she said, please, can you start making headphones that are for women as well? Because we want to hear the highest end headphones, but sometimes they're just impossible to wear. So, that's from both sides of it, like you were saying, for the tuning, but actually the physical impact of a huge pair of headphones as well. So there's definitely something there.
What kind of barriers do we need to remove for this industry to feel truly acceptable? Is it, a lack of mentorship, or a lack of invitation? Where do you think our biggest barriers are as females?
Well, I have to say from the get-go that I'm very lucky because I had excellent mentorship. shout out to Ketan Baradia on What HiFi. I call him the guru because he sort of saw my eagerness and my keen ear. Like when I was hired at What HiFi, we had listening tests. And so you know that you have the good ears to sort of and your timing, your rhythm perception, all of those sorts of things. You know they're there, and he really fostered that and sort of took me under his wing. For me, it wasn't a question of mentorship. I would say that the root of all of this is more of a stubbornness to accept change and rethink very basic roles, and I do think that sort of starts at home and sort of goes back to what you were saying, Emily, before about sort of women not really being invited into this very sort of roots level. I think it's a case of let young women or older women honestly enjoy hi-fi and music production without any kind of judgment.
It's interesting that I think that to say that it goes right the way back. Does anybody else have any opinions on that before we move on?
I think that the audio and especially the hi-fi industry, from my side of it, needs to be sort of welcoming those young women into it and saying, we have jobs for you. We have, I mean, what better industry is there that combines sort of science and tech and music and fun and travel? There's so many different jobs in the hi-fi industry that we should be welcoming these young women into it, because they're getting the skills at school. They're being told they can do anything. But if we sort of put that glass ceiling too low, that they're never going to come into the industry. And if their first experience is to go into maybe a hi-fi shop and be sort of treated like they don't know anything, or that they're not capable of learning anything, because quite often you don't know anything when you first go into a hi-fi shop, that's putting barriers there that shouldn't be there. And we've got to remove those barriers and, show the younger generation of women and young guys as well. We need young people of all genders coming in, that it is for them. And, that's kind of what we're sort of trying to do, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think removing those barriers and welcoming them in with outstretched arms is something that we really need to move towards. Emily, you were going to say something then?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that Yorkshire Sound Women Network actually did a lot of research into this as part of the Wired project back in 2023. I gathered a lot of testimonies from women and gender non-conforming people sort of across the industry. And to your point, Linette, the biggest drop-off point where women are lost from that sort of funnel into the industry is between higher education and moving into the industry. And quite often that's because of unpleasant experiences in higher education. I can see Rhiannon's nodding a lot as well. And some of the barriers that were kind of highlighted sort of through that research, are things that people are experiencing in that education setting, but also to some extent, as you said, as a consumer going into a shop, things like being sort of microaggressions, like being belittled and mansplaining, even being actively like blocked or silenced, like having lip service paid but not actually anything changing, sort of attacks on professional expertise, being paid lower, your experience being disregarded, being gaslit, being seen as not being as competent. It's a huge and very depressing list, right through to real extreme sort of serious personal assaults by colleagues, peers, students, lecturers. Like, it's a really big and quite upsetting list, all of which has like an emotional impact on people as well, in terms of your feeling more vulnerable, feeling that you're under more scrutiny, increasing imposter syndrome, which means you don't put yourself forward as much. There's just all these really complex things going on that are sort of stopping women from making more progress in the industry. And so one of the things that YSWN has been doing to try and address that is creating something called Volume Up, which is like an audio equity standard. So it's a set of guidelines that we're encouraging organisations to sign up to improve their practice and make a more welcoming space that's really inclusive. And also as part of that, we're offering gender sort of inclusion training to the industry as well. So I just think it's really important to mention that it's happening everywhere at all levels in society. It's not just an audio problem, but we are trying to do something about it.
I think that was a bit of a bleak outset. It's, there are a lot of things that have happened, and also, before we spoke about music being our hobbies, which is obviously why we were in audio, but to have such a negative impact happen to you while trying to venture on that journey would ruin music for most people. So, Rhiannon, do you have personal experience with some of that? I could see a little bit of a story brewing
Yeah.
there.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, I just think, what everyone's weighed in so far, it's been really fascinating to hear. And Emily, what you're describing very much have lived experience of all of that. I feel really fortunate in that I was always encouraged to do what I enjoyed doing. But yeah, I resonated with everything you said, Emily, and I've hit all sorts of roadblocks and criticism. But I've just kind of kept going. And I think there's a part of me, but I think representation is so important. And I think it is changing, but from the sounds of it, maybe just not as much. Becky, I'm quite shocked. Well, I'm not surprised about the women shopping online for tech and, not wanting to be mansplained to. I've countless stories of being in studios and, being mistook for someone else, and I'm like, no, I'm the engineer or I'm the producer, and it does feel discouraging. But I think it's important that we keep going and we just, keep being the representation that we want to see.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Okay, we shall move on. That was a deep question. Social media being a big part of who we all are now, we are all very present with everything that we do. Do you feel that there is the correct representation there for women in audio? And if so, is that strengthening that moving forwards, or do you think that also needs to be something that we need to really try and turn around?
I mean, social media is helpful because it gives visibility. And I think going back to what you've just been saying in the previous question, the more we see women doing jobs that perhaps we would like to do, or younger women can see us doing the jobs that they would maybe didn't even think they wanted to do, but would quite like to get involved with, the more we can have that representation, the better. And social media gives you that platform. But I guess social media is a double-edged sword, isn't it? And I don't think it's just our industries of hi-fi and pro audio. I think it's everywhere that you do get the trolling, and you do get the mansplaining, and you do get the people that would just want to go on there and be a keyboard warrior and say, what are you doing here? I mean, I've been thrown out of Facebook groups, supposedly hi-fi related Facebook groups, by men for saying, well, perhaps the pictures that you're putting up of teenage girls scantily clad holding vinyl records doesn't have a place in this group. You're still fighting against that in the sort of darker corners of the internet. I think there are good aspects to social media, the connections that you can foster on social media. It's been very helpful for me meeting other women in the industry, especially sort of starting out, to find that there were other women doing what I do and working in the actual brands and what have you as well. But there is the downside to it as well, which I think you have to challenge and you have to call it out.
Yeah, it takes the courage, definitely. And I think that's something that we, particularly as stronger women, need to make sure that it's something that we need to do, is call out anything like that. Rhiannon, do you use social media to present yourselves and what you do and the projects that you're working on?
Yes, I do. Yeah. I think social media is a great tool. And showing my age a little bit, but I remember before Instagram, didn't exist, back when I was an artist, a long time ago. And from what I have observed, I think that it's become far easier to become more visible. what I think I would love to see is, I mean, I think for music organizations really have the power to kind of use their platform to showcase like a diverse range of engineers and women in audio. So, I mean, but I do see that. So that's something that I witness and observe. And I think it's changed massively over the years. And I think that there are lots of organizations that are working really hard and really tirelessly to make sure that representation is fair across the playing field. So I think social media in that respect, I've seen really positive results as social media has grown.
Do you think it's helped your professional journey, social media? Do you think it's helped push it forwards?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Good. Emily?
Yeah, I would say the same as Rhiannon. Really, is definitely a massive plus in terms of visibility. And I've also used it, as Linette said, to connect with lots of other women in the industry, which has been fantastic. It's also really great for platforming role models in that way. I have experienced the downside of it, which is that particularly if you start sharing content and posting about women, about feminism in that space, particularly on Instagram, sometimes on TikTok, you tend to just attract trolls, and you're opening yourself up to a bunch of abuse, basically, online abuse, which I got so fed up with it that I have started remixing insulting comments on my posts. So
That's brilliant.
I had a comment on a post a while ago that said feminist trash bag. So I got an AI to voice the comment and then remixed it and wrote a tune around it. I want to get enough that I can make a whole album.
Love it.
Great.
So I'm interested, Becky, have you found a difference between, obviously you've got your professional dancing career and then you've got your hi-fi career. Is there a difference between the two on social media?
Yeah, huge difference. Honestly, a massive difference. And I do think I'd love to say that that is because dance is a visual art, and audio is I review hi-fi products, and it's actually a really difficult thing to talk about sound, to talk about how good something sounds, to really put that into words in a review so that people can understand it. Because a lot of people can say, "Oh, the sound system's brilliant," and then when you say, "Well, how is it brilliant? What do you love about it?" They sort of go, "Oh, it's just brilliant." But in terms of social media, yeah, I find social media quite challenging as a hi-fi journalist. I find that people want to pigeonhole you as one thing. And if you saw social media of me dancing and me performing, and I've done a lot of aerial, a lot of pole, a lot of musical theatre, a lot of cabaret, a lot of ballet, a lot of operas, movies. If you'd be like, well, she can't write hi-fi. What's she doing? She's a dancer. She's not she can't be intelligent. And so I do find that quite challenging. And I find that when I do things like this, my face comes on as someone who sort of wants to have an opinion about hi-fi. It is all about how you look and why you shouldn't be there. And one interesting thing about that is when I first started reviewing hi-fi, I didn't have a byline. I wasn't given, because I mean, first of all, our reviews were seen as the team. The team reviewed something, but one person always wrote the review, and I never had a byline. And I was glad, because as a woman, if I reviewed this turntable, it wouldn't be taken seriously, because the byline would say it was written by Becky Scarrott and not taken seriously. And now I fight to have the byline always. And I've actually gained a lot of respect from it. But it takes time. It takes time. And I do find, I was going to say, Rhiannon, as well, like, it was so interesting, what you said about sort of being in the studio and people and being like, I'm the engineer, I'm the boss here, and I've lost count of the number of big sort of product launches I've been to, and I've gone into the room and someone said, "Oh, can you take my coat?" Or, "Can I get another drink, please?" And you sort of think, no, I'm here as a journalist. I'm here. I'm one of the people. It happens, and you sort of think, Oh God, I think you have to try twice as hard to get half as far sometimes in those situations. And my take is that social media is challenging in that same way. Try twice as hard, get half as far. Because yeah, I'm a woman in HiFi. But look, it is changing. I'm not, it's not all doom and gloom, but that would kind of be my, if I'm honest, that's my take on social media.
It goes back to that word, doesn't it? Courage. You have to call people out. You have to actually stand forward and say, no, my voice matters. So looking back, going back as you joined the industry, if you were to talk to yourself at that point or just before you entered the industry, what piece of advice would you give yourself? How would you spur yourself on?
There's a couple of things that come to mind. There was a quote that I didn't hear until much later on. I can't remember who it's from, but it's essentially the quote is, "Grant me the confidence of a mediocre white man."
Yeah.
And I wish I'd heard that at the beginning. It's just like, have the confidence of a mediocre white man.
Who knows nothing about anything.
Yes, but it's sure that they do. They know more about it than you do.
Tell you all about it.
Yeah, in great detail. So yeah, I kind of wish that someone had said that to me at the beginning, because I think it highlights the disparity, doesn't it? I think, and I guess also similar to what Becky was speaking about earlier, when I first started to learn to play the drums and percussion when I was a teenager, my drum teacher, who was a woman, said to me, I remember very clearly her saying to me, "You will have to be twice as good because you're going to be judged more harshly." And I think that is, I told this to someone who was, someone I was working with who was quite adamant that there weren't any issues for women in the music industry. And he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry that you were told that. That's really sad." And I didn't quite know what to respond to him when he said that. I was like, "No, it's not. It's incredibly motivating. it's
I'm in my belly."
Yeah, exactly. And it's sad that it's true. It's not sad that someone said something like that to me. It's sad that it's true. So I think they would be the two things, which is just like, really, I think would have been really helpful to have had starting out.
I would say the piece of advice I wish someone had given me was, it's a them problem, not a you problem. And it sounds big, but stay with me. Going back to the sort of, trying twice as hard to get sort of half as far, and feeling very feeling like I shouldn't be in the room when I went to these big sort of launches, or when I was at these listening sessions where I was like, I can hear that and I know what's going on here, and I have, I have all of the training to back this up. I know I can write about it. I know, and still not feeling good enough. What I would do before I went to any big launch or wrote any review or feature, I would bone up on so much knowledge, and I would know everything about a company. I would know everything about the previous sort of top products, the class leaders, the flagship, and I would go into a room, and then I would ask questions, and I would be ready, and I would be present, and I would be so I would feel like I had done a good job of covering a launch or reviewing a product. And then later, I had people who are now my friends. I would have people come to me and say, "Do you know, I thought you were quite intimidating then. I thought you were a bit much." And you'd be like, and then your gut reaction is to apologize, because you feel like, "Oh, sorry, I made you feel bad. I made you," and then you think, well, no, because those are men who had the privilege of being a man. They had the privilege of being a white man when they went in there, and I didn't have that privilege, so I felt like I needed to try as hard. And I feel like we don't owe people that. We don't need to make other people we don't need to make ourselves uncomfortable just to make other people comfortable. And it is a them problem, not a you problem. You're allowed to be there. You're good enough to be there. You're talented enough to be there. Yeah.
Rhiannon?
What advice? I would probably say to myself not to look at what other people are doing so closely, just to stay focused in your own lane, and to take really small measured steps, have a goal, and just take it one step at a time. And when you get a little win, to like really celebrate it. I think that's really important, no matter how big or small, whatever it is. I think this comes from like, my kind of route in the industry and my career in the industry, but it can often at times feel like 3 steps forward, 5 steps back. So when you do get a win, like really celebrate it, and just really enjoy being where you're at, and just don't look too closely at what others are doing, because you don't know how they've got there, the journey that they've been on. You don't know their story. So that's what I'd say to my younger self, or my advice would be.
It's that saying, isn't it? Comparison is the thief of joy. When we compare ourselves to somebody else's journey, and like you say, you don't know the journey they've been on, you don't know the troubles they've had, you just see the win. So celebrating your own win is really important. And even if it's 2 steps behind somebody else, it's still a win regardless. So yeah.
I mean, it just comes from, because I've just, been so ambitious and so driven in the past, that, yeah, that's definitely something that I've had to, really struggled with. And I think actually, I know we've discussed social media, but I know that social media didn't always help with that. And that can be a hindrance for me with social media. So I'm always really mindful of that, but I won't digress too much.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think particularly when you share wins on social media, that's when people want to pull you down. And it's strange, isn't it? You would want to lift each other up, but for some reason there are people that don't. Linette, what about you? What advice would you offer yourself?
I would say, and I really agree with everything you just said, Becky, because I've had very similar experiences there. It's like, especially because I do all the news on HiFi Pig, so I'm reading the press releases. I know what drivers are in that pair of speakers. I know how much they cost. I know how much they weigh. I really get into it, and I like to learn it. And if you go to a launch or something and you're talking to people or at a show and you said, oh, so yeah, you're using Accuton drivers in that, and and you've got the diamond coated ones, and they'll look at you sometimes like, how do you know all this? It's like, well, because I do, because I'm interested in it, and it does shock people. And I think that to sort of think, well, yeah, I should be shocking you, because I should be sort of saying I know all this, and not pretending that you don't know it to make the man feel better. You definitely shouldn't do that. But the piece of advice I would say is, don't ever let imposter syndrome become a thing, because the minute that sort of self-doubt creeps in, you have to have a word with yourself and say, I do deserve to be here. I do know my stuff, and I'm not an imposter. So yeah, definitely. And I very much agree with your sort of experience of that as well there, Becky.
Okay. So can go on the same note as your entry into the audio market. Is there somebody that gave you a helping hand to get you where you were? Is there somebody that you feel, I know that Becky, you spoke earlier that you really feel like you had a mentor there that helped you up. Is there anybody that you feel, another woman, I know is a male, but we're shouting out women here today.
Yeah.
Women
No, absolutely.
and pulled you into that place.
There are a few, and there are many actually. There a lady called Claire Newsom, who used to she was an editor on HiFi. She has been since moved to PR, but I think what it is, as a journalist, it's often about access to the product, and not because you ask the loudest, not because you were the most forceful, because I'm not. It's the women who seek you out to go, I'm going to invite you to this briefing. I'm going to invite you. I'm going to get you early access to the review samples. And I would say, yeah, Claire Newsom, Liz Wilkinson, Chelsea Hinton have formed women-led PR companies that I feel have really got me into the room when I could have so easily been left out of the room. And those, I think it's because they understand, because they've come from HiFi journalism and they see the struggle. Yeah, those women. Thank you.
What about you, Emily?
Well, I was actually going to say that like Yorkshire Sound Women Network exists to do this for other people. Like that's a big part of the mission. So, for example, we run a series of paid audio traineeships for women and gender non-conforming people with different organisations. 5 of them, in fact, in the last round, including sort of, you know, people like being placed at really fantastic studios like iFi, which is like a podcast and TV and audio studio, and being paid to be there, paid to learn, and then sort of, you know, getting that foothold in the industry. So that's kind of quite a big part of the organisation's work. For me personally, I think I mentioned music production for women already. Also, and this is not a kind of direct audio thing, but similar to what Becky mentioned, on the first music that I released, I worked with a fantastic PR company called Someone Great, which is run by 2 women. And they really opened the door for me to like national radio play and all these connections. And they've also introduced me to other people since, which have been really, really helpful. So not directly audio, but kind of connected, I guess. It opened up the industry to me as an artist, which has been really fantastic.
Linette, I know that you came into the industry with your husband, but do you feel like there is a woman that you feel has given you that step up that you needed?
I think definitely, and I'd agree again with Becky, the same women that you mentioned, particularly Claire. It's really heartening to see female-led PR companies in the hi-fi industry, because that is very, very much sort of a boys' club, and has been for very many years. So it's really good to see these women coming forward, and they do pull up other women with them. When I first started, a lady that I met was Sally Gibb, who founded Cord Company. And I thought she was inspirational because she was there making cables on a kitchen table. And she's took a step back now and she's retired, but she's one of the women that was there sort of, when they were still using scantily clad models to promote loudspeakers and things like that. She was fighting against all that, before it was even seen to be wrong. So yeah, she was a real inspiration. And interesting what you were saying, Emily, about your organisation, because I've not recently started, but obviously I've been doing the Women in HiFi meetups at various HiFi shows, mainly Munich, sort of since back in 2013. And that is becoming a more formal thing now. We've got the websites on its way and setting it up as a business, and I'm working closely with the High End Society and Claudia at the High End Society in Germany to hopefully bring on sort of more formal sort of mentoring and maybe internships and that kind of thing, so that younger women can see what there is available in our industry, and that they can see that there's women like they would want to be in the industry. So that is, it's very interesting to hear from your point of view, Emily, as well, because you've been doing all that for the pro audio world as well. So yeah, it is something that I'm sure have all had women help us, and it's good to be able to sort of pay that forward.
Yeah. So professionally speaking, my whole career has just been, involved phenomenal women that work in audio. So would be really hard for me to name kind of any standout, because I've just been really fortunate in that aspect. So I've just worked with lots of incredible engineers and music creatives and professionals, mainly women actually, and non-binary music creatives. So I would go as far to say pretty much like everyone I've worked with has been really fundamental for me, and I think vice versa. I've always felt a great deal of like camaraderie when working with other women, because I think we just want to lift each other up and support each other, like knowing like how challenging it can be at times. So in that respect, yeah, I've always just ended up working with women mainly, actually. Yeah.
That's good to hear. And I think you're right, it is very different when you're working with women. You do feel much more comfortable, much more relaxed, and we do tend to try and encourage each other. I think it's who we are. It's more where we would like to see a big change in the audio. So if we fast forward 5 years, what big change would you like to see? Emily, do you want to start with you?
Oh gosh. I mean, big picture, I would really like to see a much more equal gender representation in the industry, and also in the sort of audiences, and even in how companies are marketing themselves to audiences. I think that's a really big picture, and I think based on what I've seen in the last 5 years, it would be great to see some more concrete positive movement towards that goal, I guess. Some more tangible changes, and that I think really needs to start with better representation in terms of the people who are working for these organizations. I think all that change always comes from the top, and so I think that is really what I would like to see in the next 5 years, is more balance in terms of people that are making the decisions and involving people in the industry. I think that would make the biggest difference.
Same, really. More women in hi-fi, more women in audio. I know there are brands that are now sort of championing women. I'd love to see more noise cancellation audio technicians, like the lady that I saw who was brilliant. The big headphone launch recently. But I think you're right. I think the gains are incremental. And even look, if I went into a hi-fi showroom and there's a woman in there buying a turntable, a preamp, an amp, some tower speakers, and she's buying them with her own money, and she's in there taking up time talking to sales assistants. I mean, that's a win. That is a win.
Yeah, I don't want to kind of repeat what Emily and Becky have said. So I guess on top of that, I would really love to see, oh gosh, like a restructuring of how revenue is distributed in the arts and in music in general. I obviously live in a world, as a music creative, I make music for a living. So, as a songwriter, engineer, producer, I think that the system at the moment is fundamentally incredibly broken. So I think that streaming services needs to do a lot of work. There's no lack of money being made in music. In fact, I think I read, you have to correct me if I'm wrong here, so I don't know if this is statistically accurate, but I think the music industry makes billions, and I think is actually set to increase from last year. But the revenue it's not trickling down. It's not going to the music makers, the grassroots creatives at the bottom. So the audio engineers, the songwriters, the producers, the composers, that essentially create the music, that help the streaming companies like make vast amounts of revenue. So I mean, I don't think it will happen in 5 years, but I think that streaming services really need to start doing more. And so what I would like to see is a complete restructuring of that system, or just reform altogether. And I know there are some incredible people at music organisations that are doing amazing things to try and address that. And I know that Ray, as a songwriter, speaks out for songwriters, and it's just so important. So I'd like to see more people speaking up again about it, because again, representation matters, as we've talked about. Because otherwise, without the music makers, like, we're not going to have an industry. And I will kind of, go to my grave, be like, not letting AI kind of take over, because no, we need humans, and we need to make music that we connect with, and that's a human thing. And so that's what I really would like to see, or at least some shift in 5 years' time. Anyways, that's what I'd love to see.
Amazing. Linette, lastly?
Say, going to a HiFi show and seeing even more women there. And I have seen sort of over the last sort of 14 and a half, 15 years that more and more women are coming to shows. And that's not just, you may get women coming with a husband or partner, but you are getting women either going in groups or alone. And that's really heartening to see that a woman feels comfortable enough I'm into HiFi, maybe my significant other isn't, so I'm going to go to HiFi show on my own, and to have that feeling comfortable enough to do that, I think is brilliant. And also, I looked at a few statistics, I can't even say the word statistics, before this, and one that came up that I thought was interesting was that in recent studies, 40 to 45% of vinyl is being bought by young women, sort of mainly Gen Z and millennials. So I mean, that class that as fairly young. So I'd love to see the women that are going out and buying vinyl, to see them represented when we go to HiFi shows. That would just be amazing to see sort of nearly half the audience being women. That would be really cool for them to have that interest in what they're playing that record on, and feeling like they can go and sort of shop. Because obviously at a HiFi show, you were there to kind of listen to new stuff and kind of shop around. So yeah, to see that representation would be brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. And it definitely isn't there yet. Walking around as, very small percentage of women.
But it is improving. We are getting there.
It is. But thank you very much, everybody, for your time. It's been really interesting hearing everything about you in the audio industry and how you feel you've been represented. I think in conclusion, we all agree that it is a difficult industry to be in as females, but going historically, we're in a much better place than we were, but we would like us to move much further going forwards. Audio is a big part of all of our lives. It brings, connectivity. We spoke about before, energy. There is a great thing to audio, but we still need to keep working forwards and representing all females and non-binary in the world of audio, and making sure that we're all represented and heard. And I think you've all spoken about people that have helped you, but also what's been lovely is you've spoken about how you're helping other people, which is very much what we have to do. And it's been lovely to hear how you're all doing that. So thank you everybody for your time, and thank you for your input. I've really enjoyed today, and I hope you all have too.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.